Ah, Wallace and Gromit, I friggin' love these guys. The cheese and invention-loving duo have been engraved into the British conscience for as long as I can remember, still appearing in adverts for things like DFS every now and then. I can and have rewatched the main collection hundreds of times, still finding myself charmed and excited without fail. And while I've only very recently got into checking out behind the scenes material for films, I've gone back to the 15-minute Andrew Sachs narrated documentary about the first three shorts a lot over the years, chronicling the character's evolution from Nick Park's sketchbooks to international icons.
The trouble was, A Grand Day Out was taking a very long time to make. After 2 years, Nick had filmed only about 10 minutes, animating every frame himself.
What's funny is I used to check for the 10-minute mark to be like, oh, there's the first 2 years of work. I used to think it was done in chronological order as well, but you can tell by Wallace's model that a lot of the stuff in the cellar was done first.
Another bit of trivia for you is that the story was originally going to be a spoof on Star Wars with a McDonald's in space, lots of different characters, and Wallace would get thrown in jail and Gromit would have to break him free. Interestingly, the idea would be returned to with the roles flipped in a close shave.
A reality check meant the final product turned out differently. What we got is a whole lot quainter and, in my opinion, all the better for it. They literally build a rocket in the basement to go to the moon, and it's treated as if they're merely walking in the park. Gromit builds a stack of cards in the rocket on the way there. Wallace has some toast. It's all delightfully mundane. And even though the animation would become more polished in the others, although it is still impressive here, I can't comprehend how this shot was done. A Grand Day Out nailed the charm and appeal of these characters right from the get-go, which would make them household names.
ひがんだりとか腹が立ったりとかそういうところをすごく出すからいつもニコニコしてばっかりじゃないですよね。アニメというかそういうキャラクターなのに。
What's interesting is that the adventures following the release of that documentary kind of backtracked on what made the previous movies stand out. Curse of the Were-Rabbit and A Matter of Life and Death are distinctly cartoonier than their predecessors and forego a lot of the subtleties of the humour and personalities. There's nothing inherently bad about that. Were-Rabbit is a lot of fun and Life and Death is fine. I'll talk about them more later. But the original trio of films stick out a lot more as wholly unique works when compared to anything, really.
I think the success has got something to do with their Britishness, actually. I think that's quite key to it. And it's something to do with their subtlety and underplaying the humour.
Sums it up, it's the mundanity and, dare I say, realism of the characters which really sets them apart and fits the excellent stop-motion animation seamlessly.
When I rewatched them all for this video, I paid attention to the opening of my absolute favourite of the films, The Wrong Trousers. When you really think about what's happening, it should be boring. Wallace and Gromit are at the dining table having breakfast when Wallace discovers he has financial issues. Riveting? And yet it's a complete joy to watch, from seeing how Wallace gets up and is served breakfast with his inventions, to the tiny nuances of the animation. The finger wriggle is so satisfying, and Peter Sallis's perfect voice work brings it to life remarkably and endearingly. It's the manner in which the duo interact as well. The reserved Britishness of it all follows through even as the story unfolds into a thriller of Hitchcockian proportions. It's funny too how their exploits are able to create legitimate tension by emulating the Hitchcock style very well, alongside creating some thrilling action sequences. Most love the train scene, and yes, I do also think it's sheer perfection. But not as many people give the bike, plane, truck chase, and a close shave nearly as much recognition, even though it's just as giddily exciting in my opinion. I love how these films are simultaneously cozy affairs and engaging crime stories. The balance between the two is wonderful. The evolution into one or the other never feels jarring. Of course, a large part of the success comes down to the characters themselves. I already mentioned how brilliant Peter Sallis's performance as Wallace is, portraying your average Englishman with his knack for inventing, giving him quirk. If you haven't, you should definitely watch the Cracking Contraptions collection. The unnecessary lengths he goes to create seeming practicalities is at the forefront of these 2-minute scenes. There are some classic bits in there, right down to random stuff for me like this scream. I don't know why that's so funny to me. I also love how he doesn't pay for the cheese in the shopping one. Actually, that invention might have been an asset in COVID times, huh? And, am I the only one slightly unsettled by the ending of the dinner one?
Moving on.
Gromit is a perfect comedic foil, as well as the unexpected star when getting thrust into the heart of the drama, while Wallace usually fumbles about as the victim. He doesn't need to talk or even bark to be lovable. His eyebrow movements say everything. They play off each other brilliantly as a double act whose friendship can also be very touching when it needs to be. I love both these characters, but their adventures are highly elevated by two other big aspects. One is the music, the main theme of course being iconic, but the rest of the music fits the mood perfectly in either its quiet bounce or sweeping grandeur. Then there's the animation itself, a perfect example of animated naturalism. Aardman used to be an expert at embedding a sense of realism within the distinctly cartoonish look when they first started using voice actors, and the result is chock full of personality. Using the medium of stop motion works effortlessly with the reserved nature of the Wallace and Gromit world. It never ceases to impress and is a huge part in what makes this series so damn memorable.
In recent years, Aardman's projects have gravitated towards a wackier cast and more obvious comedy. But given the effort that goes into stop motion, it's a shame at how forgettable they wind up being because of how conventional the plots and characters are.
I've mostly been talking about the original 3 shorts, but I'll briefly discuss the last 2 Wallace and Gromit films in a bit more detail. I thoroughly enjoy Curse of the Were-Rabbit, and as their feature-length productions go, it's probably Aardman's best. I don't have loads to say about it though. It's exciting and fun to watch, the way it borrows more from horror conventions works well, and there is a novelty in seeing these characters in a made-for-the-big screen adventure. Then we have A Matter of Loaf and Death, my least favourite Wallace and Gromit, although I'll happily watch it. I've got a good memory of watching it when it first aired on Christmas Day 2008, and it's got its fair share of memorable moments, but I'm gonna sound really snobby here, but by this point the series had become a full-blown cartoon, especially in how the characters no longer feel like real people. Paella is a decent character, but a love interest like Gwendoline stands out a lot more for how unremarkable she is. I've known people just like her, quiet-mannered and friendly. The quaintness is all but gone by this last entry.
But take those points with a grain of salt, I'll still have a fun time watching it, and I'll always wish they'd made one more with Peter Sallis before he sadly passed away. Although I do think I did see somewhere that Nick Park had plans for another short. I'll look forward to it, and hopefully they'll go back to what made the classics
Just as Wallace finds solace in the goddamn tasty-looking plasticine cheese and crackers, I'll always find comfort in his and Gromit's adventures, always spotting a detail in the back or even foreground I never noticed before. They're ordinary folk getting caught up in extraordinary adventures, but the conviction Nick Park and company show in never treating it ironically is the biggest joy of the series for me. Wallace and Gromit, whether nipping to the moon on a bank holiday or foiling the plans of criminal creature masterminds, they're always a pleasure to watch.